Hi, everybody. Welcome to Breaking It Down with Jodi Marks. This is episode 7. Our topic for the day is being an ally for the Black community, and we have two amazing allies with us today. We have Alden Bettencourt and then Alexander Huntley. So the first question I'm going to ask them, I'm going to get right into it, is tell us everybody about yourself and what being an ally for the Black community means to you. So Alden, you go first.
Hi, my name's Alden Bettencourt, as Jodi said. We met doing P3's inaugural production of Evita, and I'm so thankful that she invited me here today. I think being an ally for the Black community, the Black, Indigenous, people of color community altogether, it is taking those steps to go inside yourself, analyze the biases and the ways you were raised, and seriously question the world around you and the world that you think you live in, and then approach it from a different angle to better help your friends.
Love that. Alex?
Hi, I'm Alexander. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa, born and raised, and then I moved to America when I was 15, where I met Jodi. And so we're friends from college, since day one. She's my day one friend. Anyway, so what it means to be an ally for the Black community is sort of acknowledging and recognizing your privilege and using that privilege to speak up and support and fight for equality and fair treatment for the Black community and their rights.
I love that. So what is the difference between performative allyship and then genuine allyship?
Okay, I'll start. So, so performative allyship is something that I feel like isn't, well, in all honesty, I learned the specific term kind of recently, and it's sort of the type of, it's not really real allyship. It's really kind of just, you are putting out like a fake thing because you feel bad and you're like, oh, I need to show people that I support the movement, but you're not doing anything further than that to support. So it goes back to the people who just posted the black square on Instagram and said Blackout Tuesday, and then didn't do anything else further than that. No petitions were signed. That's where the extent of the activism was. And then it was a trendy thing for them. And then from then on, they've forgotten or moved past and haven't, continued to be an ally.
Said anything. Right? Like performative is very I posted because it was the topic of the week.
It was the trend. It was the hashtag, and I want to follow suit and have that aesthetic that I am supporting you guys. Oh, I have that one Black friend, so I'm gonna throw this out there so they see that I said something, but then not doing anything, further than that.
All for show.
Right, for show.
I can't even imagine. I've seen so many of those black squares, and then nothing else from people.
Right.
And it's not just from allies; it's people of color as well. So it goes both ways.
Right.
But about genuine allyship, do you have anything to say about that?
Oh yes. Oh, you go. Go ahead.
I think genuine allyship is understanding that in the world we live in the times and the topics that we are now being presented, where things can hit Twitter within 2 to 5 seconds of a video upload from a protest, from a demonstration, from anything, it is no longer okay to be passively against racism, but to have to be actively anti-racist in your life. And like I said, it's unpacking a lot of your own biases, a lot of your own raising, a lot of the information that you were taught in a westernized system of education, and having to take that and seriously question everything you've been presented, and then work against the things that oppress people of color in America.
Right. How I take genuine allyship is really you are posting and keep posting if that's what you like to do. You're speaking out, you're using your platform as a place to amplify Black voices, not just only amplify your own. Also learning and educating yourself, and also others, calling people out when they say something that is just blatantly wrong. and being okay to be called out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't stay silent. Like, how do you feel about people staying silent? Like, why is that such a big problem?
Yeah, so I was about to touch on the being silent part of it, because when you don't have anything to say, you are siding with the oppressor. So if you're neutral, then you are siding with the
Mhm.
oppressor. And it's important, and going back to when you said like using your platform and using your voice, I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, I don't even have that big of a platform, I don't even have that many people
Yeah.
who follow me, like, it doesn't matter what I say. But like, the fact that you have any platform or a voice whatsoever, then it is, like, then you have that to use to speak up, to help, and things like that. So like, it doesn't matter if you have 10,000 followers or like 500. It is, you have to speak up, otherwise then you are not with the movement, you're like against it.
Yes.
I 100% agree. Talking about platform, it's by quite literally being white or being white passing that gives you a platform to reach other white people and other white passing people, because they will listen to you. You are there to carry a message against racism on behalf of the Black community, who is going to get, who's going to be suppressed and further pushed away in the narrative and written off as angry and written off as angry mobs, rioters, looters. It is your job as the white person in the room, as the white person at the rally, as the white person in this video call, to say to other white people, that's not how
Mhm.
it is.
Well, I like what you said when like, in giving the Black people like a voice where they can't really be, because there are rooms that you can get in where I can't get. You know what I mean? Like, there are places where you will be heard, and if I tried, I'd be shut down. And I think that's also a big part of being an ally, is knowing that you have that voice and that privilege to have your voice, like, just amplify it.
Yeah.
Don't just sit back and be like, oh, I could have done that day.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know what I
because
mean?
yeah, definitely. And it goes back to when I said earlier, like, for my definition of being an ally is recognizing your privilege and using your privilege to like aid the movement. Because it's like, the thing is, the fight for equality for the Black community and for the rights of the Black community it's been a thing like throughout history. Like, it has, and like, the Black community have spoken up, they have voiced and fought, and and things haven't, I mean, small things have changed, but it's like we're still on
Like,
this
not enough.
journey. It's not, and the reason is because the oppressors are not going to listen to the Black voices. And then, so that's when the responsibility falls on non-Black people of the people who will be listened to by like the people in power. And then, like, that way you are, yeah, listening and learning and then amplifying Black voices, and you're carrying their message to the forefront of the people who can change things.
Mhm.
They're the ones that will listen to non-Black people. You know what I mean?
I totally all of that second it, amplify that itself. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think one of the greatest things that I have heard concerning anti-racist work and being an ally comes from, she's an Instagram creator. Her name is Sophia Rowe.
Yeah.
She's a private chef, as well as she does a lot of critical thinking sessions and almost like therapeutic sessions for people of color and the Black community. And she's given so many wonderful talks. She goes Instagram live, I think twice a day for 2 hours a day, just to discuss different anti-racist topics. But one of the biggest things she has said that has like resonated with me is anti-racism has to be unprovoked and fully tied to your integrity when there are no Black people in the room. They are counting on you to be an ally and speak for them when there's no one in the room, and you have no one to try and be the champion for, no one to try and be the white savior for. It is your job. And you have to realize that that comes with running a risk where people might come at you, they might write you off as crazy, but you have to take that risk because they aren't in the room. You have to.
That's the thing though, like, when people say, "Oh, I don't want them to, like, think of me a certain way," or like, you know, like come at me. And I'm just like, why would you want those people in your life anyway?
Exactly.
I'm just speaking facts. I don't know, just why would you want to surround your people with how the way they think? If they're thinking negative, if they're thinking badly about other people, I'm sorry, but that's just not things or anybody I'd want to surround myself with.
Mm-hmm.
So their opinion wouldn't matter. And like, yes, I see where if it's like a family setting and you go, my family is very, just not woke. They're just,
Mm-hmm.
then I could see where it could be like, but that's also a way to educate,
Exactly.
take the
It's
time.
yeah.
And there's a go ahead.
Oh no. Okay. But like with the family thing, because like it's an interesting. I feel like certain people might feel hesitant to speak out because it's sort of like like we grow up wanting the approval of our parents and things like that, and then when you um, grow up and you educate yourself and you're like, oh, my parents are not correct, or they are like just they're racist, and so then I just think that in that situation, sure, it's your parents and you want their approval, but it's also like you said earlier, in your integrity and like your moral standing to educate. And it doesn't even have to be like, like some people you can call out your parents, and like just be totally honest, but it's also like certain things there are ways that you can address racism, sort of like perhaps like like if you have family movie night, this is just like an idea that I came up with, like if you're having family movie night, like pick something that is like educational and then have that conversation where it doesn't have to be like you're wrong, like but it's sort of like having that representation to them so they can see from a different perspective. There are different ways to address like racist family members, you know what I mean?
Yes, there are.
And on in working with your family, it's not like your family is someone that you can block on Instagram or Twitter after you have one bad negative interaction and there's just no change. It is all about pacing, and you have to understand that like you can burn out yourself and burn out your parents, and that it's not all going to be done in one day. I know, and forgive me if either of them are on here, but not to date you or anything, but both of my parents lived through the civil rights movement. And my mom's mom immigrated from Spain through Cuba and lived in the apartheid South in Florida, or apartheid South after coming through Florida. Long story, but it holds a lot of emotional weight to have to talk about these issues and these things. And I told them so many times, I'm like, you get so much of this already because you've seen it before. You understand what is right, what is wrong. But racism just didn't disappear with the civil rights movement. It evolved and it got more tricky and it got more ingrained in society in different ways and in different facets. And for everything I'm learning, I also have to teach them or discuss with them. And we have to digest it together. And that's a
Yeah.
lot, but you can't just give up after one heated argument, after one fight, because that's your family. You're not going to just you can't click and delete them like there's someone on social media. It is definitely something that requires pacing.
Right. And how I view it is racism is still alive. Like it didn't end, like when they were marching and all this stuff when our grandparents were alive. So you can't expect your family to get it in one conversation.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many topics that you need to talk about. So they could take so many, like, it's going to be in your life. It's honestly like the Black community. We have to talk about these things, and it's been something you live with. And I think being an ally is when you really see like, oh, these conversations were normal for us, like the Black community. And now we have to have these conversations within our own selves, in our own, communities. And it's a little eye-opening hearing stories that people have had these conversations, because I'm like, you've had that conversation? I'm so happy.
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, and it's really hard, especially in westernized society. We have an instant gratification complex, especially because we live in the age of technology being what it is. But with anti-racism and being an ally, that work, another thing from Sophia Rowe, she just said there's no such thing as a anti-racist racism is over exam. You can't cram for it like the SATs or whatever your entrance exam in college is. You can't cram for being anti-racist. It is a constant strengthening of a muscle, both intellectually and emotionally, to have to deal with, because you realize you are committing to this being the rest of your life and even beyond how long you live.
Because you have to teach the next generation to keep the fight going. You know, don't just burn out. That's one thing that you've seen history like time and time again, where the Black community, we get going, but then it's like we can't do it all on our own, and then everybody else just stops, and then it just dies away, and then everybody just goes back to normal. And that's the thing that I think we all need to realize within ourselves, that you need to do better. You need to keep educating yourself. First of all, I'm gonna say right now, Black people, we're not the ones to educate you. Go educate yourself. Okay, if I don't know how many people have asked me to educate them. I'd be like, what do you think? I'm like, did you look first? Or you just coming to me because you think that I'm Black, I can answer it.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a fine line. I'm just like, because if we're really gonna have a conversation, I'll have a conversation with you. But I want you to have a conversation with me and already know some facts. Like, I want you to take the time out of your day and, you know, use your own time. Because, right, like people keep saying, donate, donate. But it's not just donating money, like donate your time to the movement, to educate yourself.
Yes.
There's also there's a level of consent that even comes to having these conversations anymore, because if we're going to talk about systemic racism and how your experience as a Black person living in the United States of America has been, that has trauma laid into it. And therefore you have to have consent with people when you discuss these things, because you never know what certain subtopics, what certain words, what certain ideas are going to be triggering for people. And at that point, you're causing more harm than you are good.
Yes. And honestly, if you're trying to have a real conversation, don't be afraid to be called out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're coming and you want to have a real conversation, like have a conversation with the person you're talking to. And if they say, hey, no, that's not the right way or the right term, blah, blah, blah. Don't be like, oh, I don't, like, then you're just making it worse. Cause then you're making like us feel like, okay, then why did you ask? Like, you don't even want to learn. Like, what's the point?
The movement isn't about white people and their egos and their white fragility. That's the center of this narrative. We have to understand that it is not white people and white passing people. It is not our narrative. It is not our core of what we're doing. We rotate around other people that are at the core of it, and we have to respect that. And we can't be upset that we are on the outside of that.
And don't say what you think the Black community wants to hear. That too. Like I've definitely seen, like, or even the last episode, how our last panelist Greg said how people are nicer to him. You know, it's kind of one of those things. It's like I feel like that was when you're like a fake ally. Like I have to. Like
it's sort of that like I need to show. It's more about like serving yourself rather than serving the movement, is when people like try to make it more about themselves. And like I was thinking earlier about sort of during the protests and things like that, the rioters that were kind of distracting from the issue because they wanted to live out their like riot fantasy and like go out and like sort of, and then it wasn't about the movement anymore. It was about them, you know. And it's sort of like, and those people who like on their social media, when they were like, they were like, I'm going to like, do you want to go to a protest today? And she was like, yeah, let me like find my best riot outfit. Like, it's not about you, and it's not about being like seen as that like cool ally, you know?
Yes, I could talk for days. Like when, especially seeing the riots and seeing people spray painting businesses, and they were not Black, they were not of the Black community. You know what I mean? And I'm like, how are you putting Black Lives Matter, BLM, on something that we did not ask you to? And we did not ask you to vandalize things. We did not ask you to go steal something. You know what I mean? That's taking away from the movement. You are
It's
not being an
distracting.
ally, you're being distracting. You're literally ruining the movement, because you're like, now the news is so focused on all
On
of
the
the bad
negatives.
stuff. Yes, on all the negative, and then they're not looking at all the good that the protesters are actually doing, the ones that are actually there to actually protest, right?
And
Like
then,
you just have those people that just want to do it just to get in there and weasel their
right.
way.
And then it pins the like negative behavior on the Black people, because then it's like, then people on the media, they're like, oh, they're trashing things, they're stealing, and then it's just, so it's that performative allyship when it's serving yourself that can be hurtful to the movement and the Black community, because then at the end of the day, the media is always going to look for the negative, what event, and pin it on the Black people or the movement, and be like, they did this and it wasn't them.
Right. And it's also like, why is the movement just towards like the Black community? Like, I know we are pushing for, the Black community and equal rights and everything, with police brutality and everything like that. But why can't it be a movement for everybody? You know what I mean? Like, if something happens, why is it the Black community did this? What, you know what I mean? Like, why is it pinned? Like, why does the news create such a stereotypical like view, and then also I feel like they don't let people think for themselves. So when this was first happening, a lot of people who were saying I'm an ally were giving false facts. And I'm like, no, no, like, educate yourself. So I want to know, how are you guys educating yourself? What are some things that you're doing and maybe other people can follow?
So it's a great time right now because we're on social media. We all have Instagram and Twitter and things like that. It is so easy to Google, like, even if it's as basic as like, help me find like Instagram pages for Black Lives Matter, stuff like that. They'll give you lists, articles, things like that. And also, I'm lucky enough to have so many like people in my Instagram circle who are constantly sharing information and petitions and things like that. And it's so easy to like click on their post, find where it's from. Most of these pages are dedicated to information and educational things. Follow the pages, or actively seek out, things like that. It's so easy that it's not an excuse to not educate yourself right now.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely same thing. Curating a feed and a following of people that are Black creators or people who are working with the Black Lives Matter movement is a great way to get started, because I've been exposed to so many more amazing artists, creators, writers, just amazing people that way. But another way to do it, and this again kind of goes back into what I first said about what does it mean to be an ally, is understanding, where you sit, where's your part. There's that old phrase, think globally, act locally. And you have to really analyze, okay, what is my lane? How do I reach my communities I already exist in with my anti-racist work? So I've seen some really amazing things from people who work in environmental conservationism, and how that is actually like a huge topic for like, is conservationism and like green movements, are they racist? And surprisingly, yes, a lot of them are, because it has to deal with like food deserts and shortages, and how certain communities are hurt by food banks that don't get supplied enough, and because of the redlining and those different things, and how people who are already interested in those things can further their anti-racist work because they were already interested. And for us, or at least for me, like in theater and in artistry, now I'm able to like, okay, I already knew a little bit about these things, but how can I further different causes and different groups that need my help? And I'm already established in those communities and those groups, and how can I help?
So both of you are artists, right? So how do you think you can be an ally for the Black community in your craft?
So I think it goes back to the fact that we have a voice and we have a platform or things like that, and so it's like kind of like how you can your art is also your voice. There are ways that people digest things differently, like certain people. And this was something that you guys talked about on one of your previous episodes, where certain people digest things differently. And it's like a message is better understood maybe in a song or like in a movie or things like that. And it's sort of just like creating different outlets and different ways to make it more digestible for the other non-Black people who might have issues with just being like called out on, or like, you know what I mean? It's giving you different ways. And so it's sort of like creating art that services or that like isn't sort of very like Eurocentric focused and like serving, white people or whatever. So it's just, creating stories and art that is inclusive
or supporting
that too. And like as an artist, but also as an art consumer, like supporting Black businesses and Black artists, and like watching movies made by Black people, things like that. And that, again, it's something you can just Google if you don't know any, like look it up.
And there are some good movies. There's some good literature out there.
Yes.
Yo, that's another episode, I promise.
Right, yeah. But, exactly. And then recommending those pieces to your friends, being like, I saw this great movie, I heard this amazing song, sharing it on your story and things like that. It's all about sharing and like when you said amplifying Black voices, there's Black art out there that is just not, like under-recognized. Put it out there, like for your circle.
Yeah. And with Alden, you're more in the theater, so how can we amplify and be an ally in the theater?
Absolutely. Prefacing before I like kind of dive into this, I spoke to some great friends of mine who I went through my theater program with at Pepperdine University. So I just wanted to give a thank you to Caitlin O'Grady, Paige Elson, and Corbin Ford, who I reached out to and talked to. I'm like, what do you want? What do you wish more allies knew? How do you wish they would act in the arts? And one thing that came across that we've already talked about is not only amplifying Black voices, but elevating them and giving them credit. And one of the greatest things, my friend Caitlin said, she's like, here's a great example. And there is a 2016 article on Jezebel.com talking about Obama's senior staffers and how 3/4 of them were men and 1/4 of them were women. And the women felt like they had a hard time always getting their ideas in with the discussions and the briefings every day, but also getting the due credit and due process that they needed for those things to actually come up and be accredited to them. So the idea was by every woman in the group repeating what the last woman had said and saying, well, because person A gave this idea and I really appreciate that. And the next person would be like, yes, resounding what person A said. It's the same thing when working in different specialized groups of Black people, white people, and other Black Indigenous people of color is you have to say, well, I really liked your idea, Jodi. Oh yeah, going back to Jodi's idea. You have to elevate those voices, because if you are in the minority, it will just get lost in the shuffle. Psychologically, we will just forget. It'll just get lost in the shuffle. And then, I mean, for theatrical in general, another thing that came across was it has a lot to do with season programming, because now what we're going to start seeing is a lot of programming of Ragtime and a lot of programming of Porgy and Bess and a lot of
Ragtime.
and those stories, while they do include more roles for Black people, you have to question, is that a Black narrative? Because Ragtime is all about a white savior.
Literally.
And no Black people have agency in that show. Like, all the lead Black characters die in that show, and it's not a positive piece. It's powerful, but it's not necessarily positive and sending an anti-racist message.
I've had that thought so many times when thinking about Ragtime, because you're right though. It's always like, oh, the white woman saved her. And then it was like, and she was a criminal. You know what I mean? Like, I was like,
and none of your leading Black players live to the end of the show.
No.
They don't. And it's powerful, but it's not I want to say it's not uplifting. It's just, it's a sad narrative that doesn't need to be perpetuated because we're already seeing it in the media.
Yeah. I do think though that Ragtime does shed a light. Like it is a very powerful statement. And I feel like the reason why I want to do Ragtime is because it has that narrative though, right? Like it makes you think that. Like why are all the Black people dying? Hmm?
Yeah.
Why did they make them criminals? Why does everybody, or even the immigrants in the thing, why are the immigrants put like, portrayed this way? Like it makes you think also. Like it's, you know what I mean? I feel like that's the reason why I'm like, okay, I will do this show because it's also making you think and realize, be like, that's not my friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I totally
But
get what you're saying.
you have to have this preface of being like, this story, while powerful, it does,
It's
you have
still,
to put out to your audience.
Yeah.
They can't just passively consume it. And then another thing, but straying more, going into modern programming of shows, you really need to ask the question, like, is this show like dependent on programming Black people or Black Indigenous people of color into this show? If
mhm,
it's if it's a fantasy story, if it's Into the Woods, Cinderella, any of those stories where it's like it's a farce, it lives in a fantasy realm, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have a family of different people and different races and different gender identities and
right.
colors, and it's okay because that would reflect reality.
Mhm.
That needs
And
to happen. Mhm.
yeah, and then finally another point my friend Paige raised that was just like such a good hard hitting thing was, you can program like exclusive shows too that do deal with Black people and Black culture, and white people can still get a lot out of it.
Mhm.
They won't exclude them or ostracize them because at the end of the day, theater and art reflects humanity.
Yeah.
It's just humanity. There's so many stories. There might be nuance and cultural aspects that might go over some people's heads, but at the end of the day, it is watching the human experience, and there's nothing like that. And how lucky we would be getting, how lucky some people will get to be if they would be like, I see myself in that, and then it humanizes it.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. I have some questions on our Facebook Live that I
Oh,
want to hit
questions.
before I lose them. Um, so from one it says, where is the line between being complicit and being silent because you're simply learning?
Ooh.
It's again, it's the ego sacrifice. It's saying I'm hearing, I'm learning,
Mhm.
and then you have to state where you are in that learning up
Mhm.
into that point. Be like, I really want to have this conversation. I don't have enough knowledge or information yet, but know that I want to have this conversation.
Yeah. Touching
Mhm.
on that, I feel like also a lot of times, certain people are discouraged from saying things because they feel like they're going to say something wrong, or they're you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh no, I don't have all my facts straight. We're all learning constantly. It's a, like you said, it's a lifelong journey. We're all, things are going to evolve and change, and we're still learning, unlearning things. And so we're never going to have it perfect. We're never going to know everything. So it's just sort of the intent and action of just at least acknowledging that there is something that is needed to be said. And like, even if you say it wrong, it shows there's still that sort of like, you are bringing the conversation up, and you are sort of like still, yeah, having that conversation and bringing those topics up.
Right. And I think you have
Mhm.
said that really well because there is a difference, I mean,
Yeah,
if you're being complicit, you're not even
trying.
right. Like you could still be silent but you can, I don't know. I don't really want to say silent because if you're
You're
trying, you're
listening.
still active listening, or
Hmm.
even voicing or asking questions, I guess I
Yeah.
should say. You know what I
Ooh.
mean? Because being silent, you're not asking anything. You're not asking for clarification. You're not asking for just to learn more in depth of maybe a term you didn't know. You're just nothing, just dead silent. But if
Exactly.
you were to ask questions, I'd be like, oh, okay, you might be like silent on the topic because you're taking in all the information,
Yeah.
but you have questions. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, you're engaging still in the conversation,
Exactly.
whether, because like, yeah, like even in regular conversations in life, like sometimes you won't have a lot to say, but you're like soaking it in, you're present, and yeah, questions, great.
As long as you're present, be present. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have another question. So what are some ways you've called out your families for being racist or insensitive, or friends?
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting with my family, because I have had a little, some like things that we've had to discuss. My dad is from South Africa. He was protesting apartheid. And I would say that, like, my dad is a great ally. He's always educating himself and things like that. Great. And my mom's from China, and it's interesting because I feel like there are certain things with my mom where, like, yes, I'm like, yeah, good for you for saying that. But then there are certain, like, it's the microaggressions or like the small things where it's like you like, she'll say something and you're like, wait, that doesn't sound right. Or like, that sounds like backhanded. And it's those things that it's just something that you bring up and you're like, oh, hey mom, I don't think that or that word isn't appropriate anymore, or not even anymore, just it's not appropriate. Or like or that thought is like, it's old, it maybe what she grew up on. And that's the thing, when people are like, oh, I grew up in a different period and things like that, and I'm just like, okay, but you're in 2020 right now, so, and you have a mind that functions, you can learn and unlearn. So it's those little things. And then with friends, it's kind of the biggest thing that I come across is hearing non-Black people using the N-word and speaking up about that and being like, that's not your word, don't use that. And so it's just like, because some people will let it pass, like they'll just like they'll hear it and they're just like, and pretend like they didn't say it. But it's like, you need to bring it up, you have to say that's not your word, or whatever racist remark or action it is.
I'm gonna say this one time, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, if you are not Black, and sometimes even if you are Black, don't use the N-word. The N-word to Black people was a way of reclaiming that word and using it as like, it wasn't, they used it instead of basically, using as a derogatory term to themselves. Go the ER? No.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I hear this all the time. A Black person gave me permission.
Oh, no.
I don't care.
Yeah.
If a Black person gave me permission. You're not around that person, are you? You're around me. Did I give you permission?
Everyone's
and that implies that the one Black friend that you have, the one Black person that you have consulted on any topic, whether it be, am I allowed to use the N-word? Am I allowed to wear box braids? Can I have a silk do-rag? What about anything? Not one person is the monolith for the entirety of the Black, Indigenous people of color community. Not one person. When I reached out to my friends, I said, I understand that you aren't the monolith for all of these things, but I value our relationship. And because I respect you, I want your opinion and want to elevate that. But there are things that, like, you should just accept about the entirety of it. Even if you have permission, you should understand in your mind, like, I wonder why that would be offensive to other people.
Mm-hmm. And for me, my view on the N-word personally is no one should use it. Not even Black people. I know I might get some backlash from my Black people, but I don't think anybody should use it. And this was engraved in me from a young age. My papa fought in war. Like, he says that word is just so, to him, every single time he heard it, right, was just derogatory and just used as such a hateful word that hearing it, even in, I guess, the connotation where we took it back, is still hurtful, like, so it's like, you shouldn't even say that. You should not even call your own brothers and sisters that. You should make another word, call yourself powerful, call yourself beautiful, or be like, that's my brother, that's my sister. Why do we got to say that's my,
Yeah.
So to me, personally, don't think anyone should use it. Other people in the Black community I know will say, we reclaim that word and that's for us. It's honestly who you're talking to, but everybody basically knows the same thing. If you're not Black, don't use it. Period.
Period.
Point blank.
Yeah. No, definitely.
But have you guys ever been in a situation where you've heard that and you've just been like, just like in passing, like if a friend said it? I'm really curious.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
We keep doing this. No, yeah. And it's, I hear it when people are rapping along to a song or just like, I don't know, they want to seem like, and yeah, they want to seem like cool or whatever. I don't know, whatever their reasoning may be. I've heard it, and I heard it a lot in South Africa too, growing up. And the thing is, like, I acknowledge in my past, like, that I haven't, like, I wasn't educated on certain things, and like I have in the past, like, heard friends say it, and like I didn't know at the time, like, the weight that comes with that word and like the history and stuff. And so I was like, okay. But then it's like, once I've educated myself on that word, and I'm just like, I have to make a point to say something if I hear it. And it's just, and some people might be like, it's weird, it's uncomfortable, like, correcting people, especially if it's like your good friend. Like, if my really good friend used it, like, you're just like, oh, but you have to bring that up. It's just,
you have to, or they won't stop.
Can't, yeah, there's no way that we can be better if you're not addressing your issues. If you're just like letting things slide, you're not going to grow as a person.
Yeah.
I think I definitely agree. And I think a major instance where I witnessed that was my freshman year of college. I think I was going out to dinner or something with some friends, and this song came on, and one of my white friends said the word to the song, and my friend who was sitting front seat in the car, she's Black, and she turned off the radio and she turned around and she said, listen, she's like, I know you may have Black friends who said you can say it. I know you may have always sung along to the song that way. As long as we're going to be in the same school and going to the same place and working together, you aren't going to say that. Not in front of me, not in front of any other Black person, because you should respect me. You should respect other people that way. And she's like, I'm doing you a courtesy by being nice to you about this, because there's a lot of people who wouldn't be. And she said, you can say neighbor, you can just not say anything, you can do whatever, just don't do that. And that was just such a powerful thing, because I had honestly thought in my mind, I was like, I've heard some people say, well, my friend gave me permission or whatever, and it was just one of those things you glazed over. You glazed over it. And it was in that moment I realized, I was like, there really is a weight to it, whether it be because of reclamatory terms, whether it be because it does have such a hurtful thing and root to some people. It was just one of those instances I'll never forget. And then also, not just, it goes beyond, your white passing or your non-Black friends, when they try and use it and they say, well, I'm oppressed too, therefore I can say it. I had someone I recently knew in the last few months, same thing, said it in a song, someone shut off the radio, got into it with them and said, just because you are a Latin American with immigrant parents and that you have been discriminated against doesn't mean that you can use that term or catch-all term. And same thing, I, as a queer person and a member of the LGBTQ community, I know that sometimes I will use the FAG word as a reclamatory term. Doesn't mean anyone else can say it. And sometimes I've had other gay people say, yeah, I don't appreciate it. I don't want to hear it.
Right.
And that's just a thing. But you have to understand where those boundary lines, those invisible boundary lines lie, and where the root of those words and how they were used.
Yeah.
Know your boundaries.
Know your boundaries. I like what you said about being in an oppressed group, because there are, lots of different communities and minorities that are like oppressed, and sure, but like the oppressions are different. You know what I mean? It's a different experience and things like that. Like, just because I am part of the LGBTQ community or like because I'm an immigrant, sure, I have my struggles and my things, my battles, but it is not the same as the battles of someone who's a part of like the Black community or, you know, things like that. And so it's knowing, you know, and being respectful, because it's not, yeah, like you said, not one person is the end all for the entire group. And it's knowing, you know, and being respectful. Like if someone calls you out and says, I don't feel comfortable with that, don't just be like, oh, it's okay, you know, it's just one person who's uncomfortable. You should take that to heart, because you treat everyone as an individual, not like as a group.
Right.
Well, and the moment you say that, well, it's okay, or this person, you are at its very core, that is a very mild, passive form of gaslighting someone, making them think that their experiences, their feelings, and their gut reactions to things weren't valid.
And the thing is, in our own communities, we all have different experiences. You know what I mean? Like you can't say, oh, but you don't know my experience with that word. What if I was called that word yesterday? Like, you know what I mean? So it's the fact that you have to be respectful of others. And at this point, I'm not just talking about the Black community, I'm talking about every community, you know? And that's also where being an ally stands. And I get so, like, just my mind gets boggled, because when people choose which allies they want to align with, you know what I mean?
They're not inclusive.
No. And I'm just like, but how can you be an ally to them, this group of people, but not be an ally over here?
Exactly. And even being a part of a specific group and not being an ally to another. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where you see racism in the queer community, and you see homophobia in people of colors, or xenophobia in, like, you know, like another minority group. It's just the fact that it's strange, because it's like you experience hardships and oppression yourself. Like how are you to say I'm better, that I deserve rights, but you don't? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Well, I intersectionality is, and that's another big, and we've been here before. It was a big thing in the 60s, and it is a big thing again now. Intersectionality within different oppressed groups and different people groups. One of the big things I've said before is, if your feminism, if your anti-racism isn't intersectional, then it isn't. Period.
Exactly. You have to be inclusive, otherwise you can't. Yeah, like Jodi said, you can't pick and choose who you want to support, like specific people. Like even within like the Black community, like you can't be supportive to, you know, your friend or someone you deem as educated, like like someone who goes to college, and be like, and then make that separate or that divide for, you know, maybe Black people with disabilities, or in certain areas or neighborhoods, or with certain cultural backgrounds, you know, it's or a transgender Black person. It's because then you become divisive and not inclusive, and it's sort of, you can't pick and choose what group of people within certain communities that you want to support. You support everyone.
I actually want to talk about that real quick, because I heard a woman at work, right? She was talking about, and she was just talking to her husband, and I'm listening. I'm always listening. But she was basically talking about the difference between Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and why she supports Breonna Taylor and not George Floyd. And the only reason is because she was an EMT, and she was a working citizen and working woman. And everything she said about George Floyd was just dumb and stupid, and honestly, just everything the media portrayed as being bad. Not a good father. Didn't say that, you know. I was like, but what about his good things? You know, he was working, you know what I mean? Like, so that's what I mean when you pick and choose, right? Like Alex said, when you're like, oh, I support this Black person, but I don't support, that person's
right.
You can't do that. Like, if you want to be an ally for the Black community, you got to ride with the whole Black community. Period.
Exactly.
Like, every community has, you know, people that aren't upstanding citizens. We all know this.
Yeah.
but it's
But it doesn't
not
make
just
them
about that
less.
person. It's about being equal and
Yeah.
wanting to be included in our rights.
It's kind of like saying this person's life and rights have more value than this person's because of their experiences
And
or
their
background
past,
and
yes.
things and past or just certain parts of their identity. It's just, it's a divisive, thing. And it's just, like you do, it's like it's not an inclusive thing.
Yeah. And also, I'm going to say it, Breonna Taylor, you guys should still support and go out and email, donate, keep fighting the good fight, because all of our killers are still out there, all the policemen.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for that checklist to have all the checks. Everybody's seen that.
Yes, we've seen it.
I'm waiting for that day, and I'm posting. It's going to be just galore. But yes, so just, I feel like social media has become, I'm going to post today about it, instead of I'm going to keep the good fight going and you're not going to stop me.
Yeah. Or it's like, sorry.
No, keep going.
Or it's like, let me share this one post. That's enough activism for the day. And then let me go back to my regular thing. It's sort of like, you feel like you have a quota to meet to show people that you're still That's another performative thing, is because then it's like, or just like sharing and then not signing a petition or something. Or like, it's just going, and it's not even to show off to people. You don't need to prove to, people that you're an ally. You are an ally because that's, your integrity and your moral standing. When you're like you said earlier, when you're like the only, or there isn't, another Black person in the room, you're still an ally. It still stands. You're not showing off for them. You're not trying to prove to them that you're an ally.
And also realizing that for every other white person, white passing person, and non-Black person that you share an infographic on, or a different idea on, or a different take, or a different social media post from, I received a message from one of my Black friends today who says, like, I was talking about leading up to this, and she said, I learned so much from what you share and you learn, because things aren't taught that way in US history. We're still dealing with social study curriculums from 1992 and even earlier that haven't been adjusted in school systems. So you have to remind yourself that it's like, as much as I'm learning, I can be reaching everyone.
And that's what I also want the Black community to know. Like, you can't say to everybody else, go educate yourself, without educating you first. You know what I mean? Like, you have to take the initiative. If you want change, you also have to educate yourself and keep educating yourself. Because you're right, Alden, like, things aren't shown in history class. They're shown selective things that they want you to know, and they skip everything else. Like, everybody's like everybody, like culture, where everybody comes from. It's kind of like, if you're diverse in this place, you have to, kind of do your own history class for yourself, even if you are an Asian American, Black American, Native American. Like, you have to do your own research, and that's ridiculous.
Absolutely. And I've had friends who've been willing to write their experiences out and share about like things they didn't learn about from schools. And even, we had Juneteenth in the last month. And I didn't know what that was up until about a year ago. And I knew some Black friends who didn't even know what it was up until a few years ago recently, because it wasn't taught about. So it's knowing that what you share, what you read, it may seem gratuitous and annoying to some people, or like you're showing off, but if you know in your heart that you're learning and that other people are going to watch you and learn, doesn't matter how many followers you have, you're going to reach someone and it's going to make an impact because they took the time.
Yes. I get also, when you said followers, when celebrities
turn my light on, sorry.
When celebrities post and they're like in bikinis or like showing abs, and then like their description is like Black Lives Matter. I'm like, some people don't even read the post, bro. Like, some people skip over that and they just look at your photo and they like, and they're not even liking for the like right reasons.
Yeah, and it's
You
also
have, yes, if you have
it's
that,
not even appropriate.
no, it's not.
Because you know that caption has nothing to do with your thirst trap, your selfie, whatever. If you're going to make a post, an informational post, then say like, you know, I've seen a lot of like people posting selfies and it's like there still is injustice for Breonna Taylor, blah blah, or and hashtag Breonna Taylor bottom. Use her photo. You know, why like
She's
make it relevant?
beautiful woman.
Yes.
Okay.
And just it's just knowing like just that it doesn't relate. There's no correlation to post your selfie.
There's cognitive dissonance. There's no connection, and therefore people won't process it that way.
Mm-hmm.
They'll look at the photo and be like, this is my friend, they posted a great selfie, I'm gonna like it. They're not gonna read it. And if they do read it, they're gonna be like, wow, that was weird. Or like, wow, who
yes,
was that?
They're
What
like,
was this all about again?
Okay.
Right.
And even at a more sinister degree to this, if you know people, there are some people out there who do shady things, celebrities included, and like some people, you know, that they will use that as a scapegoat to divert from some shady things that they have been doing, or taking the blame for things that were happening before everyone turned their eyes to this.
Yes.
And that comes from your consumer power. It just really, when you have to think about it and you see people making those posts, you as a consumer, you can hold even huge companies and brands accountable by knowing how you spend your money, how you consume their content, how, you know, did they
know
actually
your
post any
dollars
resources.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I like that, because you know a lot of companies will do this, and this is just like with every type of like activism that they try to do. They're like, you know, like for Pride Month, certain companies will post their rainbow on everything, or like, you know, they'll make like a Juneteenth post or something that's like, we support whatever, and then they will donate to like, or you know, like, or just their where they use their money goes to the complete opposite thing. They don't actually support, they're not donating to Black Lives Matter organizations. They're not donating to like whatever, you know, or they're donating to anti things. And it's just researching where you're buying your product and where your money is going, because at the end of the day, we live in such a capitalistic society that money is so powerful, and like, you know, your dollar or your whatever you spend your money on really has power, and it can go a long way supporting Black owned businesses, supporting companies that are genuine allies, you know. So it just like, and that goes again to just looking it up.
It totally, it's that easy, and it's things we already do that we just have to ask the question, oh, is there a small Black owned business that does the same thing that I'm already looking for? For instance, I had two friends of mine who just got engaged, and I really wanted to send them something to congratulate them. So I was like, oh, I have, you know, there's a larger company that I'll usually send like cookies or cupcakes from. And I love them. And then I had to think, I was like, no way. I'm like, I bet there is a Black owned bakery that does the same thing. And sure, it took me a little bit longer sorting through Google and like a couple different resources, but I found a female Black owned vegan bakery that ships internationally. And so that's why I was like, oh, yeah, it took some effort. But that, again, at the root of all this, it does take some effort to go Google things. And when you really put it in perspective, that's not that hard.
Yeah. I found a search engine literally yesterday on Instagram, and I'll have to look it up real quickly, but it's sort of it's kind of like Google. You literally just type in what product you want, and it directs you to, and it gives you a list of Black owned businesses where you can get that product.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's Nile, I think, but I don't know if that's their actual URL.
Nile. Probably look it up on Google. Their handle though for Instagram is the Nihilist, if anybody wants to go.
Yeah, and so that way you can be like, oh, I've been meaning to get a new pair of socks, I don't know, and then you can just be like, oh, let me, instead of going to Target, I can get it from, you know, this local business. So it's just small things that you can do where you can adjust your behavior, because we're all creatures of habit. You know, it's so easy to just be like, I know where to get certain things, so I'm gonna go there. But just like minor changes where you can like where it's not necessarily like such a huge thing that's going to inconvenience you, but it's helping the movement and it's doing so much for so many people, and you don't
I completely agree with both of you. You know, knowing where your dollar goes and who it benefits is huge, right?
Mhm.
Because being an ally, you have to know your dollar goes so it doesn't hurt the people you're trying to ally.
Yeah. Oh, I want to bring one more thing up about the money thing.
Hmm.
So on social media, there's been a couple lists that have been circulating of certain companies, fast food chains, restaurants, businesses that donate to anti-Black organizations or efforts. And so it's been like shown, and it's a lot of things that people that are very popular that people support on the daily. And when I see people who have learned about it and they're like, oh, but their food is so good, like Chick-fil-A, and they're like, oh, it's okay. They apologize or something, whatever it may be, they still are donating to organizations and efforts that are going to hurt that community. Why spend your money on something just because you like the taste of their chicken or whatever?
Right.
Find an alternative that is, better for what the movement and things like that. It's just, it's so lazy and it's so easy for people to just dismiss that. And I think that's an important thing because money is powerful.
So powerful. And
Hmm.
sometimes people don't realize how powerful it is.
Hmm.
But I love these lists because they really are
I
calling
do
out people.
too. No, it's so eye-opening because I feel like I also didn't know. Like I have spent money at some of these like companies, and that's in the past. I can't do anything about that. But now I'm just like, my eyes are open. Now I can find alternatives, and I can, find, yeah, alternatives. It's so easy.
Honestly, I just love how many Black businesses are coming forward.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I just want to buy from all of them.
I know. And
Like,
some that I'm surprised about, like this one little market slash like uh diner air thing that was down the street from where I used to live. Like I love them, and it's so cool to find out, like I'm like, wow, they're Black owned too. So like I've been supporting, and it just feels so good in my soul.
I know I've looked at all these Black businesses and I've been like, oh, I can get band-aids in my shade. Like, what? I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
I should get band-aids in my shade. Like,
Hmm.
hello? And some people might think that the bandages come in my shade, but no, I'm light, but not that light. Okay.
Right.
But how do we not burn out, Alex? That's the thing.
Okay, so it's this whole just being an activist or an ally or whatever is a relay race, and this is something that I've seen on social media. I love that analogy because we're all like in our different lanes. We're all heading towards one goal. You do what you can, and then when you're tired, you pass the stick or whatever torch to the next person. You rest, you recharge, and then you keep going, because at the end of the day, we're all heading towards the same goal. Because if you burn out, then you're not you take care of yourself,
Same
really.
point there.
You
Yes.
have to. And it's very draining for the Black community, and it can be draining for allies, or just like it's a different muscle, I guess, if you haven't done it before. But yeah, so it's knowing what you did. It's knowing your lane, what you can do to help, doing it the best you can, chill, and repeat.
Yes. I found that sometimes you just have to just one day just take your time, just go silent, and not silent
Hmm.
in the term of like you're still not learning silent,
Yeah,
but like silent from maybe just on
watching the
social
videos.
media,
Yeah.
right? Just because sometimes it can be tiring, at times seeing a lot of also the harder subjects to look at, like the police brutality, and
Mhm.
after so many times, I don't want to speak for the whole Black community, but me personally, if I see so many videos of my people getting hurt, it literally makes me just want to go in a ball and cry. You know what I mean? There's so many times where I've been like, you know what? The phone just needs to go away for a minute, because honestly, in the Black community and also being an ally, your mental health comes first. Okay, I want everyone to know that. Your mental health and your well-being and your state comes first. You cannot fight the good fight if you are not in the right mind or state
Tip-top
to
shape.
do it. Yes. And just, I don't know, just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And come back when you can.
Exactly.
But still be there. Like if somebody says something, check them. But we're actually getting to time, guys. But I just want to have the last thing be, what do you want everyone to take away from this that we've talked about so far?
Okay. No, I'll start. I think my overall takeaway, or what I want, I don't know, my most resonating thing is it's acknowledging your privilege if you have privilege and using it. It's and knowing what you can do with it. You don't have to do everything, but it's just the changes that you can achieve in your circle start with you and then your surroundings and just go from there.
And Alden?
Yeah, I think kind of in the same idea, same realm, is know that this work, the anti-racist work, isn't fun. It's not merit-based, but it is towards something that is so overwhelmingly powerful. And it really matters the most when there are no Black people in the room, that you are unprovoked and you have that integrity within yourself to speak up when they aren't around and make those changes, call out those microaggressions, those false facts, those false opinions, call them out. And when you start to feel like you're wavering or like you're getting emotional or you're getting wily because of these things, check in with yourself and go back to the foundation of all of this, your biases, your privilege, your experience, all of that. Because to keep building this house, you are going to have to just keep checking on the foundation of it all and realize who is at the central of this narrative. What is my lane? What am I doing? Am I intact with that? Great. Then I can keep doing the work.
Yes. The things I would want everyone to take away with: don't be afraid to be wrong. Black people are not required to educate you. Go and educate yourself if you can get to any form of information. Get uncomfortable, have tough conversations, use your privilege, because you can get into places where we can't, and use your platform to amplify Black voices. Like we said, support Black businesses, donate. Like I said, that doesn't always mean your money, but donate your time, or just
things you
your
are already giving money to. See if they're giving. I mean, just a plug now, one of my favorite podcasts raised a lot of money for a charity that I stand with called Black Girls Code, which brings Black Girls Code. It brings Black females from 4 to 17 and educates them on computer programming and a lot of the necessary resources and how to do it that would put them up for higher required jobs in the STEM field and give them the necessary resources they need.
Yes.
So
that's another thing. Look into organizations.
And set up recurring donations, because sometimes it might be, it's really good to give that one big donation and check it off, but it's also good to build it up over time.
Yes. Yeah. And the last thing, keep learning and educating yourself. And that's never going to stop, and that's everybody. That's just not allies. That's everybody. But, also know that it's everybody versus racist, not the whole black and white debate. We're one collective against a fight against racism. And I think that's what we all need to do, and just learn that love is love, like we all say. And I hope that you all take away how to be an ally from this episode. And thank you so much to both of you for coming on. I loved having you guys. And good night.
Happy to be here.